Let me tell you a truth most people will never say out loud. You're not failing because life is hard. You're failing because you keep breaking promises to yourself and then acting confused about why nothing changes. If you treated your friends the way you treat your goals, you wouldn't have any left. And until you fix the relationship you have with you, no strategy, no motivation, and no fresh start Monday will save you. Most people believe they're failing because they lack clarity, knowledge, support, or the right strategy. But deep down, the truth is far more personal and uncomfortable to accept. You're not failing because life is unfair or because others have better opportunities. You're failing because you repeatedly break the promises you make to yourself, and that destroys the foundation of self-trust. Every time you say, "I'll start tomorrow," or "this week will be different," and then you don't follow through, you teach your brain that your words mean nothing. Imagine treating a friend the way you treat yourself, canceling at the last minute, making excuses, showing up late, or not showing up at all. Eventually, that friend would lose faith in you, and that is exactly what has happened between you and yourself. It's not that you are incapable, it's that your internal relationship is damaged from neglect and inconsistency. Your actions are proving to your own mind that you are not someone it can rely on. And once you lose trust in yourself, discipline becomes impossible because you no longer believe the commitments you make, even when you desperately want to. The lack of self-respect is not loud or dramatic. It shows up in small, subtle, daily behaviors that seem harmless, but they erode your identity from the inside out. It's the snoozing of alarms, the promises of just one more episode, the skipped workouts, the unchecked to-do lists, and the silent compromises you justify. Those tiny betrayals compound over time until you no longer feel in control of your life, but can't understand why. You say things like, "I know what I need to do, I'm just not doing it," and that sentence alone reveals how disconnected you are from your own inner authority. You intellectually know the right actions but emotionally avoid them because you don't feel obligated to honor your own standards. If a boss gave you a deadline, you'd meet it. But when you give yourself one, you negotiate your way out. That is not a knowledge problem, that is a self-respect problem. You've conditioned your brain to believe your personal commitments are flexible and optional rather than non-negotiable. People admire discipline in others because discipline reflects self-respect, and deep down, you wish you could trust yourself the way you trust people who keep their word. But you can't build self-respect with affirmations, quotes, or motivation videos. It's built through evidence, repetition, and aligned action. If you're constantly searching for motivation to start, that itself is a sign that you don't see your commitments as sacred. Self-respect means you follow through because you said you would, not because the moment feels inspiring. Think about the people you respect most. Are they the ones who do things only when they feel like it, or the ones who honor commitments regardless of the mood? You earn your own respect the same way you earn respect from others, by being reliable. You cannot bully yourself into greatness, but you also cannot heal through excuses. You rebuild self-respect through proof that your actions match your words consistently, even in small steps. Self-trust is the real currency of personal transformation, not information or planning. You could download every course, watch every motivational video, read every book, and still stay stuck if your identity is built on broken promises. Most people think they need confidence before taking action, but confidence is created through the act of keeping your word to yourself repeatedly until it becomes part of who you are. When you tell yourself you'll do something and you deliver, your brain learns, "I can count on me." That is how confidence, belief, and internal safety are formed. Without self-trust, even the best opportunities feel overwhelming because a part of you doubts you'll show up consistently enough to actually earn the outcome. The gap between who you are and who you want to be is not made of knowledge. It is made of integrity with yourself. You don't need more reasons, you need more proof. Most people keep commitments more strongly to others than to themselves because they fear external judgment more than they value their own opinion. You don't want to disappoint others, so you stretch, adapt, sacrifice, and show up even when you're exhausted. But when it comes to self-promises, you cancel on yourself without hesitation because there are no visible consequences. What you don't realize is that breaking internal promises has the most damaging consequences of all. It shapes your identity as someone who doesn't follow through. External commitments build a reputation for others to see, but internal commitments build the reputation you hold with yourself. And if your internal reputation is damaged, you won't take risks, you won't dream big, and you won't pursue goals fully because deep down, you don't believe you'll sustain the effort needed to reach them. You don't question your dreams, you question you. Rebuilding self-respect starts with redefining the way you view personal commitments. You cannot keep treating your goals as things you'll try and expect transformation. You must treat them like promises, agreements, or contracts with yourself. If you said you'd go to the gym 3 times a week, it should feel as non-negotiable as showing up for work. If you committed to waking up at a certain time, it should hold the same weight as catching a flight. You wouldn't oversleep for that. You have to elevate the importance of your own standards to a level where breaking them feels uncomfortable instead of normal. This shift isn't about perfection. It's about honoring your word more often than you break it. Small wins create momentum, and momentum strengthens identity. You don't fix self-trust overnight, but every promise kept is a brick laid in rebuilding your internal foundation. Choosing yourself requires courage because it forces you to face the truth about your habits, patterns, and excuses without sugar, coating, or blaming circumstances. It demands that you take personal responsibility for your follow-through even when no one is watching. It requires you to stop outsourcing discipline to motivation and start acting from self-respect, standards, and personal integrity. The moment you decide that your word to yourself holds value is the moment everything begins to shift. The behaviors you normalize become the life you live, and right now, you must decide whether you want to normalize avoidance or alignment. You must become someone who treats personal commitments as seriously as external ones, and that begins with small, consistent acts of honoring your word. You are either building self-trust or breaking it with every decision, and the results of your life will always mirror that choice. Most people wait for motivation like it's a lightning strike, believing that once it hits, they will finally take action, stay consistent, and change their life. But that mindset is the very reason they never follow through. Motivation is unreliable. It fluctuates based on mood, energy, environment, or convenience, which means if your results depend on feeling ready, you will always fall short. People say, "I just need to get motivated," as if motivation is a switch someone else needs to turn on for them. But the truth is, motivation isn't a prerequisite for action. It's a byproduct of action. The first step is rarely exciting. It often feels uncomfortable because growth demands friction, not comfort. Discipline isn't built during moments of inspiration. It's built during moments when you don't feel like doing the work, but do it anyway. The people you admire aren't consistent because they are constantly motivated. They are consistent because they operate from standards, not feelings. If you follow your emotions, you'll quit as soon as something feels difficult or unfamiliar because emotions seek comfort, not progress. If you want to stop quitting on yourself, you must detach actions from emotions and attach them to commitments instead. Waiting to feel motivated is the reason you're stuck. Motivation makes you excited to begin, but excitement is temporary and short-lived because it is fueled by imagination, not discipline. When the excitement fades, most people assume something is wrong, or that something isn't aligned, when the reality is that consistency isn't supposed to feel exciting. Society has glamorized the idea that passion should make everything effortless, but the truth is, even passion-driven goals demand repetitive work that doesn't feel thrilling. The gym gets boring, routines get repetitive, learning becomes frustrating, and habits become mundane, and that is the point where most people check out and restart something new hoping for a fresh wave of motivation. But the cycle of starting over becomes addictive because beginning feels inspiring and quitting feels justified. This cycle destroys progress and creates the illusion that you tried everything, when really, you just didn't stay long enough with anything. The difference between winners and everyone else is not talent, luck, or motivation. It's the ability to continue after the excitement disappears. Growth is not fun every day, and expecting it to be is why you constantly reset. Discipline is a form of self-leadership, and most people lack it because they have never learned to lead themselves without external pressure or accountability. You show up to work because there are consequences if you don't, whether that's losing your job or disappointing your boss. But when it comes to personal goals, there are no immediate consequences for skipping, so your brain gives you permission to negotiate your way out. This reveals that your accountability system is external, not internal. Successful people reverse this dynamic. They act as their own authority and hold themselves to standards even when no one is watching. They don't need someone to check in, remind them, motivate them, or threaten them. They operate from the identity of I do what I said I would do. Discipline is a skill, not a personality trait, and you build it through repetition, not inspiration. The first time you choose discipline over comfort, it feels difficult. The 100th time, it becomes your default. You cannot outsource discipline to motivation because motivation is emotional and discipline is logical. The reason people rely on motivation is because discipline requires you to face discomfort, and discomfort exposes your limits, insecurities, weaknesses, and fears. Motivation allows you to fantasize about change. Discipline forces you to confront what change demands. It is easier to dream of a better body than to show up at the gym when sore or tired. It is easier to plan a business than to execute when there is no guarantee of success. It is easier to set goals than to face the possibility of failure during the process. Motivation lets you skip the uncomfortable parts in your imagination, which is why people prefer planning over doing. Discipline eliminates the escape routes and demands responsibility, consistency, and resilience. It requires you to do the work even when the results are slow, invisible, or inconvenient. When you stop treating discomfort as a signal to quit and instead treat it as proof you're growing, you detach from the emotional need for motivation and step into maturity. There is a misconception that discipline makes life rigid or restrictive, but the truth is the opposite. Discipline creates freedom. Without discipline, emotions control your choices, and that leads to chaos, procrastination, guilt, inconsistency, disappointment, and regret. Lack of discipline is what makes life feel heavy because you are constantly battling the consequences of inaction. You feel behind, ashamed, overwhelmed, and stuck, not because you're incapable, but because you allow feelings to dictate actions instead of commitments. Discipline removes that emotional noise by creating structure. When you consistently do what needs to be done, you no longer wake up stressed or reactive because things are handled. Confidence grows because you trust yourself, momentum builds because progress compounds, and freedom expands because your life becomes predictable in a supportive way. Structure isn't limiting. It is liberating because it frees you from the mental burden of indecision and self-negotiation. People often say, "I wish I had discipline," as if it's something genetic, but nobody is born disciplined. It is cultivated through repetition and identity-based choices. You become disciplined by repeatedly choosing aligned action even when it feels inconvenient, The first step is removing the belief that discipline requires motivation or excitement. Discipline requires clarity and standards. You must know what you want, why it matters, and who you want to become, then build routines that reinforce that identity. Identity is what sustains discipline long-term, because when an action aligns with who you believe you are, it no longer feels like a task. It becomes a natural expression of self. A runner doesn't negotiate whether they will run, it's who they are. A disciplined person doesn't debate their commitments, it's who they are. Consistency becomes easier when discipline becomes part of your identity. Habits fail not because people don't want change, but because they don't anticipate the emotional resistance that comes with it. You assume the problem is lack of motivation, when in reality, the problem is the expectation that change should feel good. Change doesn't feel good. It feels unfamiliar, uncomfortable, and inconvenient. If you expect motivation to guide you, you will quit as soon as reality becomes harder than the fantasy. You must normalize the discomfort curve of growth instead of interpreting it as a sign to stop. This is the point where discipline matters most, when progress is slow, when results are not visible, and when taking the next step feels pointless. That is the exact moment that separates those who transform from those who repeat cycles. Discipline is choosing aligned action, especially when progress is not obvious. Most people claim they want growth, success, change, or transformation, but their daily decisions show a stronger commitment to comfort than to progress. You say you want to evolve, but the moment discomfort appears, you retreat to what feels familiar, even if the familiar is the very thing keeping you stuck. Growth demands discomfort, because you cannot create a new life with the same habits, beliefs, and behaviors that built your current one. You want confidence without facing situations where confidence must be earned, strength without struggle, clarity without confusion, and results without resistance. You call your avoidance protecting your peace or listening to your body, but often it's just fear wearing spiritual language. You label opportunities as risky, difficult, or not the right time, without realizing that comfort is the real risk. Comfort trades your potential for temporary relief, and the tragic part is that most people don't recognize this pattern until years have passed and comfort becomes regret. Comfort convinces you that staying the same is safer than trying and failing, but in reality, avoiding effort is the most guaranteed way to fail. You blame circumstances, timing, people, or luck, but really, you're protecting comfort at the expense of growth. The brain is wired to seek safety, not success. So if you don't consciously choose growth, your default will be comfort. This is why you choose the couch over the workout, scrolling over reading, excuses over effort, and familiarity over challenge. Growth requires energy, discipline, resilience, and emotional discomfort, while comfort offers an immediate reward with no effort. But every comfort-based choice compounds into dissatisfaction, self-doubt, and stagnation. You can't expect to live a life you're proud of while repeatedly choosing the path of least resistance. You don't need more motivation. You need to stop worshiping comfort as if it's protecting you when it's actually limiting you. People often say they are waiting for the right time, but waiting is usually a socially acceptable way to hide fear. You tell yourself you'll start when life is less stressful, when you're more prepared, when things settle, or when you feel more inspired. But those conditions rarely arrive on their own. Growth doesn't show up to those who wait. They know that hard conversations are not threats. You think you're being patient, but really you're delaying discomfort, not preparing for success. And the longer you delay, the harder it becomes to start because comfort strengthens its grip. Every day you delay action reinforces the identity of someone who doesn't follow through, making future change even more difficult. When you finally look back, you won't remember the reasons you delayed, only the results you never achieved. Time won't make action easier, repetition will. It's easy to call people who succeed lucky, rather than acknowledge the uncomfortable truth that they consistently chose growth over comfort. You see their results, not the internal battle they fought to stretch beyond their limits. You don't witness the days they didn't feel like working but did anyway, the nights they stayed committed while others relaxed, or the fears they faced privately. Instead of admitting someone worked harder, longer, and more consistently, you tell yourself they had better circumstances to protect your ego. But shifting responsibility to luck robs you of agency. You don't need luck. You need the willingness to endure temporary discomfort for long-term gain. If you swapped your comfort-based choices for growth-based ones for even 90 days, your life would look different. The question is not whether growth works. The question is whether you'll tolerate the discomfort required long enough to experience the reward. Most people underestimate how often growth disguises itself as inconvenience, difficulty, or uncertainty. You imagine growth will feel empowering or inspiring, but in reality, it often feels like frustration, resistance, or doubt. The workout feels tiring before it feels energizing. The new skill feels embarrassing before it feels natural. The change feels chaotic before it feels organized. But people misinterpret early discomfort as a sign they are on the wrong path instead of proof that they're breaking old patterns. Everything you want is on the other side of repetitive discomfort, and every time you retreat, you reinforce the belief that you can't handle temporary difficulty. Growth isn't supposed to feel comfortable. That's the whole point. If it were easy, everyone would do it, and it wouldn't be called growth. It would just be life. Comfort gives you the illusion of safety, but nothing is more dangerous than a comfortable life that leads to regret. Regret is not born from failing. It is born from knowing you could have done more but didn't. Comfort silently steals your time, ambition, and potential, while making you believe you're protecting your well-being. You think comfort is relief, but long-term comfort turns into dissatisfaction. A comfortable life becomes suffocating when you know you're capable of more but chose the easy route. You can't avoid discomfort entirely. You only get to choose the type, the discomfort of growth or the discomfort of staying the same. One leads to pride, the other to regret, and regret lasts far longer than any temporary discomfort ever will. The priority of comfort shows up in your habits more than your words. You say health is your priority, but your actions show convenience is. You say financial freedom matters, but your spending reflects impulse over discipline. You say personal growth is important, but your time goes to entertainment, not evolution. People don't get the life they want. They get the life their habits are built for. Your results expose your true priorities, no matter what you claim to value. And when comfort is the priority, you'll always sabotage your own potential. Changing your life requires changing your priorities from comfort-driven to growth-driven. That shift isn't philosophical, it's behavioral, daily, and measurable. Choosing growth doesn't mean eliminating comfort, but it does mean delaying it. Growth asks you to choose long-term fulfillment over short-term relief, empowerment over excuses, and identity evolution over self-preservation. You won't always feel like choosing the harder path, but the more often you do, the more resilience and self-respect you build. Growth isn't a single life-changing moment. It is built through repeated decisions that stretch your limits. It's deciding that comfort is not the goal, becoming who you're capable of being is. Comfort protects who you are now, growth builds who you could be. People often obsess over outcomes because outcomes are visible, measurable, and admired, but they rarely think about the identity required to sustain those outcomes. You want success, but you don't want to become the version of yourself that success demands. You focus on the result. More money, better habits, a healthier body, stronger relationships, but without transforming the identity behind the behavior, change remains temporary. You can force results for a short period through motivation or pressure, but without identity alignment, you will eventually snap back to who you believe you are. The reason most people repeat cycles isn't lack of desire. It's that their identity still matches the old version of themselves. If you see yourself as inconsistent, you'll act inconsistently no matter how big your goals are. If you see yourself as someone who always quits, you'll quit even with the perfect plan. Identity is the thermostat of behavior, always regulating your life back to what feels familiar. Many people chase outcomes because they believe achievements will create a new identity for them. But identity doesn't arrive after the success. It must be built before it. You think losing weight will make you disciplined, earning money will make you confident, or finding love will make you worthy. But outcomes don't build identity. Identity builds outcomes. A person who identifies as healthy behaves differently long before the body reflects the results. A person who identifies as a leader acts with responsibility before the title exists. A person who identifies as worthy sets boundaries before the world validates them. You don't wait for evidence to claim the identity. You create evidence by acting as that version of you now. If you don't shift who you believe you are, you will sabotage any success that contradicts your current self-image. Your identity is shaped by what you repeatedly do, not what you occasionally wish for. If you say you want change, but your behaviors remain rooted in old patterns, your identity has no reason to evolve. The gap between where you are and where you want to be is created by the gap between who you are and who you need to become. Most people try to change their life without changing themselves, which is why results never stick. You can change your environment, your routine, or your goals, but if you don't change your internal beliefs, you'll recreate the same life in a different setting. You are the common denominator in your habits, relationships, finances, and decisions. True transformation begins when you stop upgrading the goal and start upgrading the identity behind the goal. Becoming the next version of yourself means shedding parts of your current identity that no longer serve your future. And this isn't comfortable because identity is tied to safety and familiarity. Letting go of old patterns feels like losing a part of yourself, even if that part is the reason you feel stuck. You have to release beliefs like I'm not consistent, I'm not disciplined, I'm too emotional, I always fail, or this is just who I am. These aren't truths, they are outdated self-perceptions built from past experiences. You cannot build a new future with a self-image rooted in old stories. Reinventing yourself requires grieving old versions of you, forgiving your past self, and choosing to believe in who you're becoming more than who you've been. Evolution requires identity courage. Identity is reinforced by your environment, which means you must also evaluate the people, places, and habits that shape how you see yourself. If you surround yourself with people who normalize mediocrity, inconsistency, and excuses, then rising above that identity becomes harder. Your environment must match the identity you want to grow into, not the one you're trying to leave behind. That may require distance, boundaries, or learning to stand out and be misunderstood for a period of time. The version of you that wants growth cannot stay loyal to environments that keep you small. You are not obligated to shrink to fit the comfort of others. Surround yourself with people who challenge your thinking, elevate your standards, and reflect who you want to become, not who you used to be. Identity alignment turns discipline into a natural extension of who you are instead of something you have to force. When an action is aligned with your identity, it feels less like effort and more like self-expression. A writer writes not because they are motivated, but because it's who they are. An athlete trains not to impress others, but because training feels aligned. When you adopt the identity first, habits feel supportive instead of restrictive. You no longer rely on motivation because the behavior reflects your sense of self. This is why identity-based goals last while outcome-based goals fade. You're not chasing something, you're becoming someone. To shift identity, you must act like the future version of yourself before you feel ready. Change is not fake it till you make it. It's practice it until you become it. Every aligned action is a vote for your new identity. And every time you choose the old behavior, you reinforce the old one. Your identity shifts through evidence, not intention. You don't have to transform overnight. You simply have to stack more votes for who you want to be than who you've been. Ask yourself daily, what would the future me choose right now? And then choose that action, even if it feels uncomfortable. That is how alignment is formed, not through perfection, but through consistent identity-based decisions. The truth is, most people don't fear failure. They fear becoming someone new because of what they must leave behind. Old habits, old narratives, old coping mechanisms, old comfort, and sometimes old relationships. But staying loyal to an identity that no longer aligns with your future is a silent form of self-betrayal. You can't become the person you dream of being while protecting the behaviors that keep you average. Reinvention is not a single moment. It is a series of choices where you repeatedly choose the future you over the familiar you. And the more you choose your future self, the more natural it becomes to live as them until one day you no longer recognize the person who settled for less. You were not born with a fixed identity. You adopted one through experiences, influences, fears, and stories, meaning you have the power to rewrite it. You get to choose who you become next, and nothing in your past disqualifies you from that evolution. You don't rise into a new life by force, you rise by alignment. Your life is always teaching you who you are through results, and if you don't like the reflection, change the identity, not the mirror. You are not stuck because you lack potential. You are stuck because you are committed to an outdated version of yourself. The moment you decide to evolve your identity, your reality follows. You don't get the life you want. You get the life that matches who you believe you are. So if you want a different outcome, become a different you. Become the person your future requires, not the one your past created. Because your identity is the root from which every result grows. And when you upgrade the root, the fruit always changes.